It is the final word. Sri Lanka Australian Daily back on the roof at Gaul. Adam Collins and Bharat Sundaresan with you for cbussuper.com.au. Get your super sorted out. 8.87% annual return across their 40 years of existence. Past performance, not a reliable indicator of future performance, as was the case here. Past performance, this pitch, we thought it was going to go square and spin everywhere and be violent. Didn't quite work out that way because of how Australia batted. Sum all that up in 30 seconds. Baz.
Well, the pitch was supposed to turn diabolical today, and for a while we thought it was. 3 for 91 Australia when Usman Khawaja got out. Then in walked Alex Carey. Steve Smith brilliant with his feet, brilliant with his hands. Alex Carey swept, reverse swept. Steve Smith tried reverse sweeping as well. He wasn't very good, but he made his 36th Test 100. Alex Carey got his second Test 100, and all of a sudden Australia are so far ahead in this game that they might even get away with just batting once.
Yeah, it does feel that way. They go to bed tonight at 3:30 for 3, a lead of 73, an unbeaten stand of 239 from just 331 balls between Smith, who's 120, Carey, who overtook him on 139 late in the final session. It was borderline uncompetitive cricket towards the end. 5, indeed 6 out at some points. Sri Lanka, I feel bad saying they gave up, but it looks like they were just surrendering to the situation they found themselves in, because Smith and Carey batted so exquisitely well together. Carey enterprising, reversing and lapping from the get-go. Smith, after building into it, it's like he picked up from where he left off last week with his twinkle toes and his baggy green and all the rest. 36 Test tons, 7 in Asia, now a record for Australia, overtaking Alan Border. More runs in Asia than anyone for Australia as well, overtaking Ponting. 5 against Sri Lanka, 4 in 5 Test matches. Fuck me, what can this bloke not do?
Well, the one thing he will do is he will go to India in 2027. You know, he said to us.
He did.
Yeah, and one thing he does
He
do
did.
is he just like makes up things like he did in 2023 when he told us in Ahmedabad, nah, this is my last trip. I don't think I'll be back in India in 2027. You were lying, Steve Smith, because you didn't tell us that you have this up your sleeve, because this is, I mean, he's always been a genius in the subcontinent, but this is not just the best he's batted in the subcontinent, Adam. This is probably the best anyone from outside the subcontinent has batted in the subcontinent. I know Joe Root has a great record in India and in Sri Lanka, but the way Steve Smith manipulated the field, this is a turning pitch. Don't get it wrong. I know there will be some who'll wake up, see the score and say, all these things they said about the pitch. People made a big, there's hype and hoopla about this pitch turning into a nightmare. It's just flat, yeah. They just must have just, booked bed and breakfast in and had fun. It wasn't the case. No. It really wasn't the case, because there was a lot of balls that spat at the batters, and, Marnus Labuschagne got out early, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. And even towards the end of the day, when Sri Lanka had the field spread out, I think they didn't have a slip fielder for probably the last 2.5 hours of play. Definitely not during the last session. Maybe bits and pieces here and there. But there were balls that were gripping and turning big. But unfortunately, the Sri Lankan spinners, including Prabhat Jayasuriya, who's been a humongous disappointment, just could not keep up their lines or lengths. And it meant that as well as Steve Smith and Alex Carey batted, after a point, they could just do whatever they wanted to do. A full ball there, Alex Carey said, okay, I want to sweep it there. The next short ball, I want to cut it there. Or maybe I'll pull it this time. And the fact that Steve Smith was pulling off reverse sweeps tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, it was a total tempo thing, wasn't it? You've described it well. Like when they come together at 91 for 3, it's not the type of day. No one thought we were having this conversation. No. I reckon they would have shaken hands on all out 258. And by that I mean a lead of 1. They would have thought, okay, from where we are, with the pitch looking like it's doing this, with Sri Lanka spinners very much in the game either side of lunch, it would have felt like the type of day where they were going to have to scrap and fight for everything they got. But Carey changed the energy. That's what he does. Being elevated to 5 in the absence of Josh Inglis, who's got that back spasm. I'm not entirely sure how serious the injury is. He was doing laps this afternoon, so one would imagine he'll bat tomorrow relatively unencumbered. He did have a net, which you watched a little bit of earlier today. But the way in which Carey was able to completely change the tempo, Smith got into the slipstream. He started using his feet, and then he started sweeping. That became contagious. Carey got Smith reversing for, I reckon, the first time in his Test career. At least, he might have done it on the odd occasion, but in a dedicated way. Like, that was clearly a plan of Smith's at a certain point to start reversing. And what do you know? Smith turns to something and immediately it starts working. And one thing leads to another, and these two are pulverising Sri Lanka. It didn't take long. to be critical of Sri Lanka, and we should be, the way in which they allowed Carey to dictate that tempo that I referred to before inside the first 15 or 20 minutes of his innings was inexcusable. There was no pressure around the bat. There was no helmets around the bat. There was no chat around the bat. They let Carey reach safe harbour way before he deserved to. And that's no reflection on Alex Carey. It's a reflection on the state of the conditions. You have to, as we talk about a lot in Test cricket, pick the right time to absorb pressure and the right time to press the pressure home. They missed the second bit entirely, and they paid a massive price.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, they gave up almost, and they did give up, and it's not always easy to talk about like that about an elite Test team like Sri Lanka. I mean, they nearly made 2 World Test Championship finals, not nearly, but they came close. They were in a position to do so. But the fact that they gave up, and I remember looking up at the board and wondering, hang on, are Australia ahead by 200 runs? They weren't. They were 115 runs behind, and that's when the field started spreading out.
They were only 1 wicket away from. Just to jump in there, Baz, they were only ever 1 wicket away from exposing new batters on a pitch that was turning.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like by letting the game drift to such a dramatic extent when Australia was still in arrears, they never had that chance to have that moment, to have that flourish, to have that little, not even little, to get their claws into the Australian lower middle order. Remembering that includes Beau Webster in his 3rd Test, who's not seen as a great player of spin. I mean,
we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. And Cooper Connolly on Test debut. And Josh Inglis with Shaggers back.
Yeah.
So these opportunities were missed.
Oh, very much so. When Josh Inglis playing his 2nd Test, and that period of play, which is ridiculous, where Prabhat Jayasuriya was bowling outside the leg stump to Steve Smith. This is your premier spinner on a ground that he's dominated on. I mean, if not for Rangana Herath, that fort could well be called the Prabhat Jayasuriya end, right? The number of wickets he's taken from there since he made his debut against Australia 3 years ago. But to get him to bowl over the wicket with the field spread out, with Australia still behind, they were still 33 runs behind at that point. Kind of told you everything you needed to know about today's play, and I mean, and you know, we spoke of, I mean, we came up with many superlatives for Steve Smith's innings, as we should. We came up with a lot of superlatives for Alex Carey's innings, as we should. But in a weird way, that last 45 minutes of play, the way Sri Lanka played, it took a little sheen away for me, like, because it was so bad. I mean, it was so low quality opposition, and there was a period where Lahiru Kumara was just running in and bowling, and Steve Smith was defending it, like Tom Morris said correctly, like he's playing backyard cricket.
Yeah.
It was that bad.
Yeah, and look, thankfully on that front, the Smith innings was already a gem when he was about 60.
Exactly.
The way Smith played early on, like I'm probably repeating myself from last week, but he just looks a cricketer reborn. The willingness to use his feet. I know that's plan A for Smith away from home in these conditions, but doing it with such panache. I mean, there's using your feet, and there's using your feet the way that Smith does. He goes late, and he still gets to the pitch of the ball almost all the time. The way that he was driving against the spin, before tea it must have been, it might have been just after lunch even, might have been before lunch, come to think of it. Driving against the spin on the up and not quite getting to the pitch, it was supreme hand-eye coordination. It's just a joy to see him do this again. And again, backing over a point I made last week, it is naive to say that anyone could have said with any real surety this was going to happen for him again. He was stuck on 32 tons. Baz, you were there with all of us.
Thank you.
You were there with all of you.
I said before the start of the summer, hey, watch out, he's batting as well as he ever had.
And then you saw him get strangled down the leg side a couple of times.
But
you were with the pack.
The next week I wrote before the Gabbatis, go and check it out. I said the big score is coming, not because I'm predicting it, because he knows it's coming. I've never seen him happier with his batting, Colo, than he was at the start of the summer.
Okay,
he was so happy with his
But even
batting.
acknowledging that, there's a numerical problem that he was starting to experience, and he went back to number 4, and his returns over a couple of years were diminishing from the Ashes Test at Lords beyond that.
Correct.
There was really nothing much... the 91 not out when he carried his bat against the West Indies as an opener. So it's not for nothing. He was still making occasional contributions. But I suppose my point is, had his career ended on 32 Test hundreds, it wouldn't have been completely shocking. It would have been like, that is a sad thing. He never had that... I don't know, that renaissance of sorts. And we celebrate Smith for what he had been at the peak of his powers and the ton machine that he had been. Now, four tons in 5 Test matches. this run is remarkable.
It is.
Not many times you see any Test cricketer rattle off 4 tons in 5 Test cricketers. It may very well be that he's back to something resembling his peak. And if he can sustain that for a couple more years, it's not just about eking out the last little bit of his Test career. It's about whether he can scale the heights that he scaled back between 2013 and 2019 again. And if he can, even for a year, it would be something bloody special.
Well, he's just 6 or 5 centuries away from equaling Ricky Ponting.
Yeah.
He always makes 100 in London, so he will make 100 at the WTC final. He hasn't played a lot of Test cricket in West Indies, but I think he averages 150.
Got a 199 at Jamaica,
There
and
you
they're
go.
playing a Test in Jamaica.
They are so you would back him to score runs there. The form he's in, and yeah, I mean, going into that home Ashes series, he might be just 1 or 2 away from getting to Ricky Ponting. He's in that kind of form. But you're right. I mean, I think my favorite part of the innings today was there was a period where Jayasuriya was bowling. They had 2 extra covers, and you spend enough time in India, Adam. And at times when people walk, don't do it if you live in India. Do not cross the railway track where you're not supposed to. But you'll often find 2 people on opposite sides of the railway track, and the trains will keep going, and you wouldn't know when to cross. That's what those 2 fielders felt like, because he kept hitting balls through that gap, and they just kept screaming past them, and they would just look at each other and go, "Oh, another one missed." So,
and barely a gap to work with in the first place. That was part of it. He was working in such fine margins, which was a hallmark of the innings. So Steve Smith will resume tomorrow on 120, Carey 139. Should we take a breather in return for the Hall of Fame?
No,
a bit
just
more?
for that, we have to speak about the one batter who got out cheaply, and
we forgot him. Let's do that.
We have to talk about Manas. And
We do.
Yeah, and look, you know how much it means to me to see Manas do well, and it breaks my heart to say that. Look, he just didn't have a great morning. I mean, he was there having a net as always. Steve Smith was netting next to him with no pads on. I think that says a lot about what Steve Smith taught out of that pitch and the form he is in. And then Manas came back, and the team was in a huddle, and everybody was just standing around listening to what the coaches were saying, clapping along. And Manas was the only one sitting down on an esky, tossing a ball around. He was paying attention. I don't want to say that he wasn't playing a team player, but you could see that his head was somewhere else. He was already thinking about what was to come, the innings, the Jayasuriya, the pitch. And then he hit a boundary of the first ball.
A really great boundary, so the way he got to the
Perfect
pitch
boundary,
and reached it and middled it. And, a bit like last week when he wristed one down the ground early on. I'm with you. Like, it's difficult because Manas has now gone 27 Test innings without 100.
Yeah.
He's averaged 27 and a half in this World Test Championship cycle, and it's nice to use that as the reference point, because we're nearing the end of that at the moment. That's across 35 innings. The 100, it's not as though Labuschagne hasn't made important contributions through the 2-year cycle, right? Everyone in Australia was asleep, so they don't remember what he did at Old Trafford on that Saturday afternoon.
That's correct.
If not for that innings, Australia would have lost at Old Trafford, and they would have lost the Ashes, right? So that was an Ashes saving ton at Old Trafford. The twin 50s he made at Melbourne were absolutely decisive in a game that was won by such fine margins. The 50 he made at Adelaide Oval against India was also essential, given the majority of it played out on that first night when Bumrah was on one. And the way that he got through that first barrage on the second morning as well from Bumrah and Siraj Shape. It's not as though Manas has lost the ability to make runs and lost the ability to make a contribution. It's just a numerical problem that he's now experiencing for the first time properly in his career. And it's added to by the fact that Cameron Green will be fit for Lords.
Correct.
Josh Inglis made 100 on Test debut.
Yes.
And Sam Constas will almost certainly return to the top of the list to enable Travis Head to drop down to number 5 for the World Test Championship final as well. The squeeze has arrived, and it's unavoidable now. Unless he goes out and rattles off runs in the second dig, he's going to find himself in a precarious selection position.
Will there be a second innings though? I mean, when he got out and the wickets were falling, that's when I was finishing my column, and in my column I said the one way he can kind of take some attention away from himself is if he can score a match-winning 100 or match-winning score in a run chase, but it looks unlikely that it's going to happen. And you're right, I think the squeeze is on. Don't forget Nathan McSweeney is also part of the squad, who is naturally a number 3 batter, which is Manas' spot. And my biggest immediate concern for Manas is if he doesn't get an innings here, he goes to the Champions Trophy. He'll get only one Shield game when he goes back home. That's the last round. It doesn't look like Queensland will make the final at this point. And then, you know, I don't know whether he gets to go and play early season county cricket.
he'll play with Glamorgan, but it's asking a lot.
But because don't forget, he's also now officially announced he's going to be a father
Yes.
again. So I don't know whether he'll get a chance to go to England and play for Glamorgan the early part of the season. And then Cam Green is supposed to come back for the WTC final.
Yeah.
I'll be surprised. Look, I got some flack from some listeners on radio. I'll be surprised if Cam Green doesn't come back to number 4.
Yep.
I mean, that was a position vacated for him. And Steve Smith, then the only where he can go is push
3.
one spot up to number 3.
Makes sense.
And then where does Manas go? Because if you want to keep Manas in the side and say Green then has to bat at 6, or which means you're getting Josh Inglis out or Bo Webster out, both of whom are performing. So the walls are closing in, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, and look, it's a long time ago, but Smith has got 2 Test hundreds in London, batting at 3.
Exactly.
Back in 2015. Baz, let's take a pause. We'll return with the Final Word Hall of Fame. This is the Final Word Daily, Sri Lanka Australia Daily, the Hall of Fame brought to you by Morris Blackburn Lawyers. Now, we've been talking about insurance the last couple of days. And when Morris Blackburn look after your claim, they know exactly what they need to do, and they help all their clients get the maximum amount they're entitled to. It can be complicated, especially if you're unwell. So Morris Blackburn help people navigate through all of that. They start with a free super check to see if you have insurance cover. That enables Morris Blackburn to confirm from the start whether you can claim. Next, they gather the necessary info, help you complete the complicated forms and lodge your claim on your behalf. And once that's looked after, they help with any further requests from the insurer and deal with any legal questions that might arise. So you'll have legal experts from Morris Blackburn in your corner if you need them in that situation in life. More about super insurance through the course of the next month. Our final word moment of the day. Baz, I'll find my page. Do you want to go first?
All right, look, it's especially during this tour, our Hall of Fame involves a lot of romance, relationships. We spoke about maternal love yesterday, and now I want to talk about 3 guys involved in a relationship: Steve Smith, Manas Labuschagne, and the third wheel, Alex Carey. And look, and that was my question to Alex Carey in the press conference, because they're very, very close, Steve Smith and Alex Carey. They're always together on flights, on buses, but nobody speaks about the Carey-Smith relationship because there's Manas in the middle. And that's why I asked Alex that question, and Kez immediately said, yeah, I'm the third wheel. However, and he did then say that they go wake up early, Alex and Steve, so they can catch up for coffee. That's the only time they get to spend any time, just those two without Manas in there.
Right.
However, Alex Carey got Steve Smith to do something that Manas never managed to get Steve Smith to do, play the reverse sweep. Does that mean, Adam Collins, that he's no longer the third wheel, or should Manas be worried here? Like, I don't know.
The other man, the other guy. Well, I mean, if Smith wants to be an Olympian and be a T20 player up until the age of 39, he might need to start reversing. It might get to the point where he starts switch hitting like Maxi.
There you go.
There's the challenge for you, Stephen Peter Devereaux Smith. Reinvent yourself again. Proper Kylie Minogue stuff. My Hall of Fame, poor old Ramesh Mendez's face when he had Smith reverse sweeping, shout for leg before. He was pleading. He was pleading. We all know that feeling. We all know how relatable that is, to just need something to go your way, and it just wasn't. The Rob Quiney end.
Wow, how cool is that?
Back on the fort here, we've seen lots of signs put up. Rob Quiney, one of our faves, being acknowledged in that way was pretty cool. Oh, and I just wanted to say, I don't normally do cross-referencing on this pod, but we've had a couple of mates and colleagues from ODB, a number of them actually, with us on this trip, including Strappy, Pat Hargraves and Lachlan Corker, who've started the Silly Mid-Offs, and they've been producing lovely little, crazy little Instagram videos each day, and started the Substack and all the rest of it. So well done to Strappy and Corker. You can find their stuff
Wonderful
on Instagram,
guys,
and they've played obviously a couple of games with cricket while we've been over, as well as the Oval Dream Boys continue their tour over Ingalls. That's it for me.
Yeah, just one final one for me. Just towards the end of the day, Angelo Matthews just stood right there all by himself. And the Papare band was playing, the mascot lion, who by the way is a volunteer, doesn't get paid to do that, was dancing with some woman, and Angelo Matthews was just staring into the distance, wondering, I wonder how much fun they're having. Because from where I am, it is not fun. Hot, humid day. He can't bowl anymore. He's not captain anymore. He's not scoring runs anymore. And I wonder what was going through his head in that moment.
Poor old Big Ange camped out in front of that Gaul Cricket Club for over after over, hour after hour. That's it from us. Our coverage, as always, for Cbus Super and Morris Blackburn Lawyers. Hey, we are on the cusp of going through 800. Jeff told me overnight
All right.
that this is working. Whatever we're saying is working for our patrons. I should have mentioned it earlier. Sorry, Jeff. 800 is within our grasp.
Oh, there you
Join
go.
us. Be with us.
Do it
Get
in
the
goal.
phone call that Brat's going to initiate for you.
From Pragyan Oja, the original number 800.
Wouldn't that be something? So join up on patreon.com/the final word. Help us do what we do around the world. Good night from Gaul. We'll see you again to do it all again.